Well, we have someone fantastic from NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technology, Matthew Scholl, Chief of the Computer Security Division and the Information Technology Laboratory. Responsibilities include cryptographic standards used by the U.S. government, as well as internationally by allies and NATO partners. And he's also responsible for cybersecurity research and development, cybersecurity standards and guidelines. So we are, you guys are in the best room, best breakout of the day. So with this remarkable panel, and now Matt Scholl. Matt, thank you very much.
Yeah. Is this thing on?
Use this one. This is
Use
just
this
for the
one?
video.
I gotta, okay, that's just for the video. I gotta hold this. I had like a 12-minute thing on paper, but after hearing the questions, maybe I just do 2 minutes. Or I could start with answering some of the questions that were asked before. I don't know. What do we want to do? So let me start with a couple. Who asked about hybrid modes? Is that guy still here? Hybrid mode guy? He left? Okay. NIST will allow hybrid modes. That guy's gone, so it doesn't matter. ATOs, if anyone's using RSA or Diffie-Hellman in 2050, they will not have a good ATO. And that's, I'll talk about that. That was the third question. What was the other question?
International.
Oh, international. Oh, yeah. That's a longer answer. So we work very closely with many of our international partners through a couple of different venues, primary one being in the International Standards Development Organizations and the International Standards Setting Organizations. One of the primary ones is the ISO SC 27, Study Commission 27, which is the ISO working group for encryption. We have Dr. Lily Chen, who's the head of the crypto technology group at NIST, who's our primary representative there, and then in that body coordinates with international partners in international standards at ISO, and she will also be bringing the post-quantum encryption standards as a submission to ISO as part of her representation there. The process we used to design and develop and select the quantum or the post-quantum algorithms was also an international process. We had participation from 26 independent countries submitting candidate algorithms to us. We are in pretty constant communication with other national cryptographic authorities as well as industry representatives and academia from other countries as well. I'm in active communication with organizations like the EU through bilateral partnerships with the EU and the US as well, all looking to coordinate on congealing into using the same sets of encryption standards, which then allow for interoperability in the encryption we use, but also scale in commercial products that we all rely on. So those are kind of some of the motivators. So that's my longer international answer. As far as the other question was shutdown. Should there be a lapse in appropriations? I guess it's Saturday, is that when that happens? I go home on Monday. And Dr. Lily Chen, who I said will be at the ISO meeting, will be at the ISO meeting. So we have asked that she be exempt because that work is so important to ensuring continuation of the standards. The rest of the quantum team goes home. The impact of that is this. The standards are out in draft right now until November. So they're kind of out in the oven baking as industry tools them up, implements them, bench tests them until November when we get that feedback. So for the initial draft standards, it will not affect our timeline, assuming we're back at work by November. But there is other work. Fourth round candidate algorithms, continued cryptanalysis and other methods and mechanisms that will be stalled. But it will not hamper at least the initial set of post-quantum algorithms that we'll be deploying in early of 2024. So that's the answer to that, okay? Should I do my spiel? Or,
Yeah, Matt, that was great. Maybe
Okay.
just a little closer.
A little closer, too close, a little further.
little further, little closer, little further. Okay, I'm gonna get this wrong. Just keep yelling at me. Yes, sir.
Hi, Sidney Freeberg again. Let me ask, you know, my impression is that we've sat with the same classical encryption algorithms like RSA for a long time.
Correct.
But that cryptographic, that quantum-resistant cryptography is going to have to be more agile. People say it's going to have to keep evolving. So how does the, I mean, how do you build a standard to evolve? That's always a tension between,
Yeah.
not changing in trivial ways that make things incompatible. So you have 50 plugs for every iPhone, but not locking yourself in stone so you can't keep up with the threat.
So let me answer your question by refuting your premise.
Okay.
So we've had the RSA standard for a long time, but the RSA standard also has changed over time. RSA 1024 is no longer good. We're on RSA 2048. So we changed types, versions, and implementations of RSA over time. And we've brought in other implementations of RSA, especially around elliptic curves as well, like ECRSA and ECDSA and ECDIFI element. So it is not something that we are not familiar with, or the standards community is not familiar with, in updating and maintaining cryptographic standards, especially around the parameters of its implementation. So that is a common and well understood thing to do. In the agility space, I have that written on my paper. The initial set of algorithms that we selected are based on a certain type of mathematics called lattices, whereas RSA is based on large integer factorization. So we had to do something different. We know lattices are not susceptible to factorization by Shor, which is what makes it quantum safe. But we don't know what may or may not emerge in the future in new mathematical algorithms in the quantum space. That's why Corey keeps me informed as to what's going on, because he's smart about that. So in the agility space, what we want to do in the future is have these first two sets of general purpose algorithms, which are lattice-based, also have companions with them in the future that are different than lattice-based. So our agility will not be just within the algorithms themselves and their parameters, but also we will, and we plan on in the future, bringing in future algorithms that have different foundations, should we need that type of agility. We kind of got lucky with AES, right? AES has stood the test of time, and we went with one of them. I don't think we got lucky. I think that was the result of a lot of hard work. And we anticipate the same level of confidence going forward in these lattice-based schemes as well.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Follow-up question on that?
Yeah.
So if I understand right now, the 4 algorithms that will be approved, 3 out of the 4 are lattice-based, and I think
One is hash-based.
one is hash-based.
Yeah.
So I think there's been some fear and certainly a doubt that I've heard sort of spread that lattice-based algorithms are going to cause an excessive amount of compute overhead, and that there will be issues there. Have you taken that performance issue into account?
We have, and part of the criterion in selection was performance, and we have performed performance bench tests on all of the algorithms and standardized both software and hardware implementations and published those results publicly for CPU resource, power, gates, and time. So we've done multiple views of performance and different types of performance issues in the 2 general purpose implementations. Through that, while they are a little bit heavier than like an elliptic curve implementation, well, that's to be expected. We do think, based on those bench tests, they are good enough for general purpose use. Now, we do know that there's going to be some edge cases where they're not, and that's why we have brought in Sphinx and Falcon, which have different performance capabilities that will cover those 2 kind of, some of those edge cases where performance might be an issue.
And I'm thinking specifically around edge devices, IoT devices
Yeah.
in particular. Do you see those being applicable in that case?
Yeah, and so something like Falcon might be more appropriate to something like an IoT device potentially, or there's a whole nother suite of encryption that NIST has just completed review on for lightweight encryption, which is ASCON and the variants of ASCON, which should be your first view look for something like an IoT deployment. Okay. Oh, geez, these are hard questions.
When are we going to see the PQC candidate rounds for symmetric encryption, like an AES 512, and also like the hashes?
So hashes are good. We don't have to worry about hashes. SHA-2, SHA-512, SHA-3 are quantum resistant. You are fine if you're using a currently approved hash. Hashes are good.
Is there any papers proving?
There's lots of papers proving that. Yes, yes, for hashes I'm talking about, okay, not for block ciphers. So I'm just talking hashes. Hashes are good. Don't have to worry about hashes, which is why hash-based signatures are one of the signature methods that are quantum resistant and that are being standardized, not just by NIST, but also in the IETF as well. So hashes are fine. Now let's talk block ciphers and Grover. We are supposed to have on October 3rd, if we're not shut down, a workshop at NIST to discuss block ciphers and any needed potential changes that might be warranted for block ciphers like AES, as well as the different implementation modes of block ciphers. If we have a shutdown, that will impact that workshop and we will have to reschedule it. I'm looking at Corey in the back now. And I like this tradition of like passing the questions to the next speaker type of thing. No, Corey's saying no. We are not necessarily fully convinced that the capability to implement Grover is at the same level as the potential capability to implement Shore. Grover might require a different type of parallel processing for a quantum machine. So I'm kind of parroting what I think I heard Corey say at the coffee bar once. So as of right now, we are staying with AES 128 and 256. If individuals or organizations have concerns, then they should go to 256. The intelligence community uses 512. We currently do not. And so that's what we think we're staying with unless we hear something different. Okay? Did that answer your question? Okay. I have a paper thing too. I was gonna, no, okay, go ahead, yes ma'am. Yes. Yeah, you.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Matt, my name is Kelly. I work for a PQC company called QSecure.
Okay.
So this is a question about hybrid approach.
Yeah.
Directionally acceptable in my TINS.
Yeah.
So we layer any of the NIST recommended PQC algorithms over classical encryption.
Yeah.
Create a dual and trusted encryption.
Sure.
Do you feel like that approach will be acceptable because it's something we can start testing now and we have a DOT in other places?
I feel that approach will be acceptable. Oh, I'm sorry. It was another hybrid question. So a layered approach of current classical, I guess would be like a TLS tunnel or something? I don't know.
Yes.
Yeah.
Using PQC over TLS.
Using PQC over TLS, would that be acceptable? And I'm going to say yes. Yeah, right. Yeah. We really don't say much at NIST about protocols or about TLS that much. So I anticipate we'll follow a lot of what the IETF does there. In our key establishment guidance, here's another good acronym for you, 857, where we have guidance on key establishment. We don't say don't do hybrids, and a lot of people have asked us about it, and our general statement is we're fine with hybrid implementations. I think a lot of it is going to be in the actual how the hybrid implement. Are you concatenating the encryption? Are you double tunneling? I think that's the devil's going to be in some of the details, so to speak. And then also in NIST's ability to test and verify if you're concatenating the encryption that we can do at least a known answer test that the algorithms are doing the right things. So long answer for yeah, I think it should be okay.
Very good. So I have answers to those questions. Good.
Okay, that's the best I can do on that one, I guess. Yes, sir.
I want to follow up on the earlier question about edge devices, especially, older embedded chips and things. I come from the defense industrial side of the house where,
Yeah.
we have, right, the B-52's electronics have been replaced, but there's so many of these
Yeah.
decades-old platforms that will serve for decades hence that have, a chip from, 19 whatever in it, that has to be secure and may communicate with something. How do you even begin to inventory all that operational technology in, some piece of deployed hardware that's been upgraded and re-upgraded over decades?
The nice thing is I don't have to. Somebody else does. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, the White House published NSM-10, and OMB put out their transition memos, and ONCD and Dylan and the team are driving agencies on doing at least initial inventories, knowing the fidelity that an initial inventory will give you, and then making sure folks iterate and refine over time. And a lot of this is lessons learned from the SHA-1 transition, where we experienced just the same thing. So we're hoping we've got better push, better communication, better awareness, to drive people to do better in finding where those things are. We're also not burying our heads in the sand that some of the hardware-based, long life, silicon implementations are going to be some of the deeper challenges and may require, front-end shim implementations if things aren't going to make threat model times versus full swap replacements. We're also somewhat beholden to manufacturing life cycles when it comes to things like chips as well. They're going to take time. Does that make sense? It's hard. That's a long answer for saying, yeah, it's hard. But we acknowledge it's hard, and that's why we're trying to jump out now. So NSM 10 says 2035, right?
Which is also in the NSA policy that they implemented for the national security systems, I recall, that mirrors that.
I will agree with you then. I don't recall.
In practice, there's also the question of a store now to encrypt later threat, especially for high priority national security systems.
Sure is.
But for any data that remains relevant, like my IP that I use for my thing I'm going to be building for 10 years.
Or your bank accounts, or your health information, or your DNA, or anything that has a long life cycle to it and an expectation of confidentiality or privacy. Now that being said, there's also a tiering from the threat model, right? These machines will be expensive, bespoke, not very common. So I don't think my Amazon account will be the first thing attacked. Am I out of time? I'm almost out. I don't have anything. Any other questions? I had a thing I was going to read, but I didn't get to it. Yes, sir.
Just this week, the ISO IEC standards on the QKD, the quantum key distribution, has been published.
Yeah.
Part 2. Is there any work planned from NIST on this QKD?
We look at QKD as an interesting research topic. We think quantum networking is a good R&D program. We do have work in quantum networking in both engineering and science and mathematics. We do not believe QKD is at a state for operational deployment for security purposes. So we think it's a really interesting research area, but we do not recommend people use it in an operational setting for their security needs.
So very quickly.
Yeah.
In Europe, there has been this Euro QCI program that is currently in
Yeah, good for them.
Sorry,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So what's your opinion about those other countries like movement?
Knock themselves out, go for it. Yeah. Read the NSA paper that they published on
Yeah.
QKD. That's what I point to, yeah. Okay.
Can I just ask a follow-up to that?
Yeah.
That was an incredibly diplomatic response, but I think both NIST and NSA have come out very much on one side of QKD. So do you see any possibility for QKD in the future?
Yeah, of course we see a possibility for QKD in the future for applications. That's right. Yes, there is a potential there for the future, absolutely. But I would not recommend to operationalize it now. Can I take one more question? One more?
Yeah, one more, and then you all can follow up afterwards.
Yes, sir.
In terms of other technologies that may or may not be ready for prime time, I've talked to some companies that are saying, you know, while the current quantum computers are basically experimental toys, you can use them to generate really high entropy random numbers, and those are better than, you know, pseudo random number generation off.
Yeah.
You're like, I mean, is that actually part of the post-quantum, quantum resistant package of solutions, or is that a solution in search of a problem?
It's not part of the current post-quantum crypto package of solutions. It is a different thing. And that different thing could be used in any encryption or cryptographic mechanism that requires entropy. So it's not unique to PQC. It could be used in, you know, any encryption technique. And there's a lot of different ways to use quantum capabilities for RNGs or random bits. Some of them are very good. So yeah, did that answer?
So there really are potential threats to current pseudo RNG?
Boy, we're going to go down a rabbit hole. Sorry about this. So even before RNG is like just noise source, right? Initial entropy sources, which is the foundation for an RNG, which is the foundation for an encryption key, which is the foundation for your, I mean, it's the last turtle, and turtles all the way down, is your noise source. There are statistical tests that people run and that NIST runs and that people should do to ensure that those noise sources have sufficient random and sufficient entropy so it does not downgrade the encryption strength of the generated keys. If your noise source is not random enough, you can inadvertently downgrade the strength of your encryption. There are mechanisms, tests, and conformance programs that help you understand and prevent that from happening. There are some quantum techniques that make that entropy source more assured of the statistical randomness of that source. Sorry for that. Sorry for that. Sorry for that. Okay.
Matt, thank you so much.
He's behind me now.